In this episode, we bring together many of the ideas you have been building across service management, incident response, continuity, and recovery, and we connect them to one larger goal: keeping an organization functioning when pressure, failure, or disruption appears. System and operational resilience sound like broad terms at first, but they describe something very practical. They describe the ability of technology, people, processes, and decisions to absorb stress, continue supporting important work, recover when things go wrong, and adapt so the same weakness does not keep causing harm. For a new learner, this matters because modern organizations depend on connected systems that are never completely free from risk. Hardware fails, software behaves unexpectedly, vendors have outages, staff make mistakes, and outside events can disrupt operations with little warning. Resilience is what helps an organization stay dependable in that reality. It is not about pretending disruption will never happen. It is about being ready to operate through disruption in a controlled and intelligent way. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is to separate the two words in the title while also seeing how closely they depend on each other. System resilience focuses on the technology itself and asks whether systems can keep working, fail safely, recover quickly, and continue supporting critical services when components are stressed or unavailable. Operational resilience focuses more on the broader organization and asks whether people, processes, communications, decisions, and support arrangements can keep essential work going even when conditions become difficult. A company might have technically redundant systems and still struggle badly if no one knows who should lead the response, what workarounds should be used, or how business leaders should be updated. The reverse can also be true. An organization may have calm leaders and clear procedures, but if the technology foundation has fragile design and no recovery capability, good intentions will not keep services running. Real resilience appears when technical strength and operational discipline reinforce one another instead of developing in isolation. One of the most important beginner lessons is that resilience is not the same as perfection, and it is not the same as simply preventing every bad event. Prevention matters, of course, because organizations should reduce avoidable risk wherever they can. But resilience begins with the realistic assumption that some disruptions will still happen despite planning, controls, and skilled staff. A server may fail, a cloud dependency may become unavailable, a network path may be interrupted, or a rush change may create unexpected business impact. The question then becomes whether the organization collapses into confusion or continues functioning in a controlled way while recovery is underway. This is why resilience is broader than uptime or security alone. It includes resistance to failure, but it also includes response, recovery, adaptation, and learning. A resilient organization does not prove its maturity by never experiencing disruption. It proves its maturity by limiting damage, restoring critical activities intelligently, and becoming stronger after stress instead of simply hoping the same trouble does not happen again. A strong, resilient strategy usually begins with business importance rather than with technology inventory alone. The organization first needs to understand which activities are essential, which services support those activities, and what kinds of harm grow if those services are interrupted. That thinking matters because not every system deserves the same level of protection, the same speed of recovery, or the same investment in redundancy. A public-facing payment platform, an identity service that many applications depend on, and a life safety monitoring system are not equal to a low-priority reporting tool used occasionally by one department. Resilience planning becomes more effective when it reflects real business impact instead of treating every system as if it carries the same consequences. This business-first view also helps leadership make realistic trade-offs. Resources are limited, so the goal is not maximum protection everywhere at all times. The goal is to focus the strongest resilience measures where disruption would hurt the organization most quickly and most severely. On the technical side, system resilience often begins with design choices that keep one failure from taking down an entire service. Redundancy is part of that picture, but resilience is not just about having extra hardware or an additional server. It is about ensuring that important services have alternate paths, backup capacity, and ways to continue functioning when one component becomes unavailable. This may involve duplicated infrastructure, secondary connections, recoverable storage, diversified hosting arrangements, or service designs that can shift workload when stress appears. Another useful concept is graceful degradation, which means a service may lose some non-essential features under pressure while still preserving its most important function. That is often far better than total collapse. A resilient system does not always have to remain perfect during disruption, but it should continue delivering the most critical value the business needs. Good technical resilience reduces the chance that one isolated weakness becomes a full operational crisis. At the same time, technical resilience can be weakened by hidden single points of failure that nobody noticed until conditions became difficult. An organization may believe it has resilient application servers while overlooking that they all depend on one identity source, one shared storage platform, one internet provider, or one small administrative team with unique knowledge. These hidden dependencies are dangerous because they create a false sense of safety. Management may see duplication in one layer and assume the service is protected, even though another layer can still fail in a way that affects everything. This is why dependency analysis matters so much. Teams need to understand not only the main components of a service, but also the supporting utilities, vendors, network paths, authentication systems, and operational practices that allow the service to function. Real resilience does not come from counting copies of one device. It comes from understanding the full chain of support and making sure that the chain does not depend too heavily on one fragile point. Operational resilience becomes visible in how people and processes behave during uncertainty. When an important service fails, staff need more than technical skill. They need clarity about who is responsible, how decisions are escalated, what business functions must be protected first, how communication should flow, and what temporary workarounds are acceptable while recovery continues. If these questions are unclear, even a manageable outage can become chaotic because effort is duplicated, status information becomes inconsistent, and business leaders lose confidence in the response. Strong operational resilience, therefore, depends on defined roles, documented procedures, realistic escalation paths, and cross-functional coordination between technical teams and business owners. It also depends on staffing practices such as cross-training and knowledge sharing. If only one individual understands how a critical recovery procedure works, then the organization is more fragile than it appears. Operational resilience grows when knowledge, authority, and response processes are distributed in a way that supports calm execution during stressful conditions. Communication is one of the clearest signs of operational resilience because disruption affects more than the systems directly involved. Users need to understand whether a service is unavailable. Leaders need to understand business impact. Support teams need consistent status information, and external partners may need guidance on what to expect. Poor communication creates its own form of disruption because people start filling gaps with assumptions, rumors, and repeated questions that distract responders from recovery work. Resilient organizations communicate in a disciplined way. They explain what is known, what is still being investigated, what the current impact appears to be, what temporary options exist, and when the next update will be provided. This kind of communication does not eliminate the disruption, but it reduces confusion and helps the organization function more steadily while technical work continues. In practice, resilience is often judged not only by whether systems recover, but by whether the organization can keep people aligned, informed, and capable of making sound decisions while recovery is still in progress. Another major part of resilience is early detection. The faster an organization recognizes that a system is degrading, a dependency is unstable, or a process is drifting toward failure, the more options it has to reduce harm before the business is fully affected. Monitoring, logging, alerting, trend review, and attentive user feedback all support this early visibility. A service rarely moves from healthy to catastrophic with no warning at all. More often, there are signs such as rising response times, repeated minor failures, unusual resource consumption, or a growing pattern of user complaints that something feels slower or less reliable than normal. Resilience depends on noticing those signs and taking them seriously. Early action may allow teams to reroute work, increase resources, pause risky changes, or prepare business units for a potential interruption before the situation becomes severe. In that sense, resilience is not only about surviving failure after it arrives. It is also about seeing the approach of failure early enough to shape the outcome. Resilience also has a close connection to continuity and recovery planning. Business continuity planning, BCP, focuses on how the organization will keep essential activities going during disruption, while disaster recovery, DR, focuses more specifically on restoring technology and data after a major interruption. These disciplines strengthen resilience because they turn vague intention into practical preparation. BCP helps the organization think about alternate workflows, temporary operating methods, communication needs, and priority business functions that must continue even when normal conditions are broken. DER helps teams prepare for restoring systems, data, and infrastructure in a way that matches business tolerance for downtime and data loss. The key point for a beginner is that resilience is broader than either BCP or DR by itself, but it depends on both. A resilient organization does not wait until a crisis begins to figure out how critical work should continue. It prepares those answers in advance and keeps them aligned with business reality. Routine operational discipline has more influence on resilience than many people first realize. Configuration management, patch management, capacity planning, backup verification, access control, and careful change management may seem like separate maintenance topics, but together they shape whether the environment stays understandable and recoverable under stress. Systems become less resilient when settings drift over time, undocumented exceptions accumulate, patches are delayed without control, or urgent changes are introduced without enough testing or rollback planning. In those conditions, the organization may not fully understand the actual state of the environment until a disruption exposes the gap. Strong resilience, therefore, depends not only on dramatic emergency plans, but also on everyday consistency. An environment that is well documented, regularly maintained, and carefully changed is easier to troubleshoot, easier to restore, and less likely to suffer cascading failure when one component behaves badly. Operational discipline is resilience work, even when it does not feel dramatic in the moment. Testing is another essential piece because untested resilience is mostly confidence, not evidence. Plans, diagrams, recovery procedures, and escalation paths may look convincing on paper, but organizations do not really know how resilient they are until they exercise those arrangements under realistic conditions. That does not require turning every learning activity into a full technical simulation, but it does require practice. Teams should verify that backups can actually restore usable data, that failover arrangements function as expected, that communication channels work under pressure, and that staff know how to carry out critical responsibilities when normal routines are disrupted. Exercises often reveal gaps that were invisible during planning, such as outdated contact information, unclear decision authority, or recovery steps that take longer than assumed. This is one of the strongest reasons resilience must be treated as a living capability rather than a document set. Practice turns assumptions into knowledge and exposes weak spots while there is still time to correct them before a real event arrives. Measurement and review help leadership understand whether resilience is improving or merely being discussed. Some organizations use targets such as recovery time objective, RTO, and recovery point objective, RPO, to express how quickly services and data should be restored. Others also examine patterns such as repeated incidents, vendor performance, failed changes, unresolved technical debt, backup success and restoration results, or the percentage of critical processes that have current continuity arrangements. These measures are useful not because numbers are magical, but because they create visibility and support decision-making. Leadership can see where expectations are being met, where weaknesses keep recurring, and where investment may be necessary to reduce unacceptable exposure. Measurement also supports accountability. If the organization claims resilience is a priority, it should be able to show how that claim is reflected in planning, testing, recovery capability, and actual performance during disruptions. What gets reviewed seriously is more likely to improve over time. From an audit perspective, system and operational resilience reveal whether management, is treating disruption as a realistic business condition or as a remote possibility that does not require disciplined preparation. An auditor is not expected to engineer resilience directly, but should be able to evaluate whether critical services have been identified, dependencies are understood, continuity and recovery arrangements exist, testing occurs, roles are clear, and lessons from incidents are used to strengthen future response. Weak environments often show familiar patterns. Plans are outdated, recovery capability is assumed but unproven, communication is improvised, and repeated incidents show that known weaknesses remain unresolved. Stronger environments can explain their priorities, show evidence of exercised plans, demonstrate ownership, and connect resilience decisions to business impact rather than intuition alone. For a new CISA learner, that is the most valuable insight. Resilience is not a slogan about being tough. It is a managed capability built through design, operations, governance, practice, and continuous learning. System and operational resilience should feel less like an abstract leadership phrase and more like a practical standard for how dependable an organization really is under pressure. System resilience helps ensure that technology can resist failure, continue supporting critical services, and recover in a controlled way when parts of the environment are stressed or unavailable. Operational resilience ensures that people, communication, decision-making, and business processes can keep essential work moving even when normal conditions are disrupted. Together, they create an organization that does not rely on luck, heroics, or memory when trouble appears. Instead, it relies on preparation, visibility, coordination, testing, and improvement. For a beginner, the central takeaway is simple. Resilience is the ability to keep serving the business when conditions are no longer ideal. That is why it matters so much in audit, governance, security, and operations. And that is why mature organizations build it on purpose instead of waiting to discover its importance during a crisis.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.